Chapter 1, 6 Years, One Heartbreak, and a Job Offer Later. Sam hadn't expected the villa in Tuscany to smell like sun-warmed stone and rosemary. He stepped out of the shuttle van, squinting up at the terracotta-colored retreat, nestled between olive trees and fields of violet poppies. It was almost offensively beautiful, like something stolen from a postcard. Maybe even too perfect, like the universe was trying to soften the blow of what was coming next. Name? Chirped a chipper assistant holding a clipboard and wearing sunglasses too big for her face. Sam Rays, he said, rolling the tension from his shoulders. His suitcase bumped along the gravel as he followed her across the sun-dappled courtyard. Freelance writer. I'm here for the orientation. The assistant beamed. Perfect. You're going to love it here. The boss personally selected you for the next big feature. Romantic destinations across Europe. Sam blinked. Personally? Yep. Said you had a unique tone. Warm, funny, honest. Said you'd be great for this one. She paused and turned toward the arched stone entryway. He's inside, by the way. He wanted to welcome everyone. Sam's stomach turned. He hadn't thought about Paul Lane in a long time. That was a lie. He had tried not to think about Paul Lane in a long time. But there he was, standing in the cool, airy foyer of the villa like he owned the sunlight pouring through the windows. Taller than Sam remembered. Broader, too. Dressed casually in a linen button-up and dark slacks, holding a glass of iced espresso and talking with the lead photographer. And when Paul turned and saw Sam, the world narrowed. For a second, neither of them moved. Sam's body froze, memory and reality colliding with such force he thought he might actually black out. Paul's expression was unreadable, but his eyes, those silver blue eyes, widened just a fraction. 6 years. 6 years since graduation. 6 years since Sam had stood outside the faculty building, hands shaking, heart in his throat, waiting for Paul to finish his speech. He'd walked straight up to him, cheeks burning, trying to steady his breathing. I know this is kind of crazy, but I've had a crush on you since second year. I needed to say it before we left this place. Paul had been kind, gentle, steady, like always. Thank you, Sam. I don't really know you, but that's very brave. And then he walked away. He didn't laugh, he didn't belittle, he didn't humiliate, but he didn't stay. Now here Paul was again, looking at Sam like maybe the past had never happened, or like it had and he didn't know what to do with it. Sam raised his chin, schooling his face into a practiced calm. He stepped forward, extended his hand with a smile that was sharper than necessary. Mr. Lane, Paul blinked. Sam. The handshake lingered a beat too long. Paul's hand was warm, firm, familiar. You look, Paul began, clearly fumbling. Different? Sam supplied, letting his smirk tilt into playful. Older, Paul replied, lips twitching. In a good way. Sam's heart punched against his ribcage, but he only nodded. And you look, well, like someone who started a travel company and named it after their old dissertation. Paul laughed, low and startled. Guilty. That sound. God, Sam hated how much he remembered it. How much it still did to him. I didn't know you'd applied, Paul added after a pause. I didn't know you were you, Sam said, tone light but laced with something else, until the contract came through. There was a beat of awkward silence. Then the assistant popped in between them with a clipboard and a bright voice. Paul, I was just telling Sam he's been assigned to the Romantic Destinations feature with you. Paul's smile faltered for the briefest moment. Then he nodded. Right. Yes, I thought it made sense. You've traveled a lot since graduation, haven't you? Sam's jaw twitched. You keeping tabs? Paul shrugged. I read your piece on Budapest last year. It was beautiful. Sam felt a traitorous flush rise to his cheeks. Come on, Paul said, stepping aside. Let me show you your room. They walked in silence through the winding halls of the villa, passing rooms filled with staff, maps, sample products for the magazine shoot, and interns half lost under piles of vintage postcards. When they reached the end of a quieter hall, Paul paused at a carved wooden door. Here, he said, opening it. The room was spacious, with stone walls, arched windows, and a view of the vineyard behind the property. Sam wheeled in his suitcase, but didn't enter fully. So, he said, folding his arms, is this going to be weird? Paul leaned against the doorframe. His expression was soft. It doesn't have to be. You turned me down, Sam said. You remember that, right? Paul looked away. I do. I was stupidly in love with you. You didn't even know my name until I blurted it out with a half confession and a graduation cap still crooked on my head. I knew your name, Paul said quietly. Sam blinked. Paul shrugged, almost sheepishly. You always sat in the third row aisle seat. You used to take notes in purple ink and drink that weird cinnamon coffee from the art building. You always wore headphones, even when they weren't plugged in. Sam's throat went dry. Paul ran a hand through his hair, gaze earnest. I wasn't ready that day. I just lost someone. I wasn't open. Sam didn't know what to say. Paul stepped back. I'll see you at the welcome dinner? Sam nodded numbly. Sure. When Paul left, closing the door behind him, Sam let out the breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the vineyard outside, with sunlight painting golden lines across the wall. He should have been furious, or at least awkward. But instead, he felt electric. Uneasy. Hopeful? No. He wasn't going to do that again. Except... He pressed a palm to his chest. Yeah, his heart was already doing that thing. At dinner that night, the air buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. Staff, writers, photographers, coordinators, they all chatted like old friends around a candlelit, outdoor table covered in pasta, wine, and laughter. Sam sat near the end, nursing a glass of Chianti, trying not to watch Paul every time he moved. But it was impossible. He was magnetic in a low-key way. His laugh, his posture, the way he listened to people. Halfway through the meal, Paul stood to give a welcome speech. His voice was smooth, easy, made to be listened to. And this year, he said, glancing across the table, I'm especially excited to co-lead our romance destination feature. Our readers love a love story, and this time, I want us to give them something real, something rooted, something bold. Sam raised his eyebrows. Paul's gaze met his, subtle and deliberate. I think we've all been waiting for stories that remind us it's never too late to fall in love. The staff applauded. The wine flowed, but Sam just stared at his plate, trying not to smile. Later, when most of the team had wandered off to bed or stargazing by the fire pit, Sam lingered on the terrace. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of jasmine. Paul joined him silently, offering a second glass of wine. Sam took it, sipped, then asked, Why me? Paul didn't pretend not to understand. Because this time I want to know you. Sam looked at him, slow and careful. You sure about that? Paul nodded. 6 years ago, I wasn't ready. That was my fault, but if you give me a second chance, I won't waste it. Sam let the silence stretch between them, filled only by the cicadas and the clink of glass. Then he smiled, slow and sly. We never really got to know each other, right? Paul tilted his head. Right. Well, Sam said, holding up his glass in a quiet toast, let's fix that. Chapter 2. The crush isn't dead. It just got hotter. Sam had seen a lot of places in his life, but nothing quite prepared him for the punch-to-the-heart beauty of the Amalfi Coast. The sun draped itself lazily across the cliffs, casting honey-colored light over whitewashed villas stacked like postcards along the jagged coastline. The sea sparkled below like a bowl of liquid sapphires. Bougainvillea crawled along balconies, spilling its magenta fireworks into the salt air. Sam leaned out of the van window as they curved along a narrow mountain road, pretending he was admiring the view, when really he was trying not to glance too often at the man in the front seat. Paul. Paul in a pale blue shirt rolled up at the sleeves, sunglasses perched in his hair, talking to the local fixer about scenic towns and cafe permissions, like he hadn't just upended Sam's emotional equilibrium in Tuscany. Sam had done his best to keep it professional. He had. But Paul was making it difficult. Not intentionally, of course, but it was the way his voice dropped when he was thinking aloud, or how he always turned slightly when Sam spoke, like his words deserved extra space. The man had no business being so effortlessly magnetic, or kind, or quietly attentive. He wasn't the TA anymore, he wasn't even the boss, not really. He was Paul. And now Sam had to survive a week working shoulder to shoulder with him in the most romantic place in Italy. As the villa came into view, white walls, blue shutters, a terrace that seemed to hover above the sea, Sam forced a breath into his lungs and told himself he was a professional. He did not have a crush. He definitely did not still have that crush. Later that evening, they were sitting on the terrace with glasses of chilled Falangina, overlooking the glowing horizon. Sam had kicked off his shoes, propped his feet on the stone railing, and let the wine loosen the coil in his chest. Paul sat across from him, one arm slung over the back of his chair, the other resting lightly on the table. His profile caught the gold of the setting sun, shadowing the sharp line of his jaw, the faint laugh lines that deepened when he looked Sam's way. "I still can't believe you used to be nervous around me," Paul said, swirling his glass. "You're nothing like I remember," Sam smirked. "That's because I used to be a terrified 21-year-old with a crush the size of the library." "And now?" Paul asked, tone too casual to be innocent. Sam took a slow sip, letting the silence stretch. "Now I know how to hide it better." Paul blinked, surprised, then laughed. The sound curled something warm and dangerous in Sam's chest. They watched the sun disappear into the ocean, slipping behind a cloud bank with the drama of a curtain call. Below, the distant hum of a Vespa blended with the soft strum of a guitar from the village piazza. Paul set his glass down. "I should have told you the whole truth back then." Sam glanced over. "About not knowing me?" Paul shook his head. "About everything. My father had passed away a few weeks before graduation. I was holding it together with duct tape and caffeine. I didn't know how to connect with anyone. I wasn't in a place to let someone in, no matter how kind or brave they were." Sam's heart stumbled in his chest. "I wasn't brave," he said quietly. "I was just tired of wondering." "You were brave," Paul said, meeting his eyes, "and honest. And I wish I'd been someone who could have seen past my own grief long enough to tell you that properly." The sincerity in his voice was dangerous. Sam looked away first. "So what, this is your redemption arc?" he joked, trying to lighten the mood. "Win me over on the Amalfi Coast with wine and guilt?" Paul grinned. "Is it working?" Sam's laugh cracked the tension. "Unfortunately, yeah, a little." They both laughed then, easy and real, and Sam felt the last of his wariness slink off into the night. Later that evening, Sam wandered alone down to the market square. The air was warm, rich with the scent of fried dough and herbs. Stalls glowed under string lights, spilling over with lemons the size of softballs, hand-painted ceramics, and local wines. He found Paul near a stand selling tiny fried anchovy cones, surrounded by a group of older locals who were all talking with their hands and laughing like they'd known him forever. Paul's laughter rang out, deep and full-bodied. Sam didn't approach. He stood at the edge of the square, watching him. That laugh. He remembered it from undergrad. Back then, it was always at a distance, coming from across the library or echoing down the hallway after a class. But now it was here, alive and immediate. It sent a slow ache through Sam's chest. Not painful, just deep. Like the kind of yearning that grows roots instead of wings. Back at the villa, things shifted. Not dramatically, not overtly, but they began. It started with the way Paul brushed past Sam in the narrow kitchen, the backs of their hands touching for a second too long. It continued when Sam held a folder open and Paul's hand landed lightly on his back as he leaned in to look, his touch steady, unhurried. Sam teased him during meetings, prodding gently with dry wit. Paul took it all in stride, giving back as good as he got. "You always this smug when you're right?" Paul asked one afternoon as they argued over photo angles. "Only when I've been right for 6 years," Sam fired back, eyes dancing. Paul chuckled, shaking his head. "You're a menace." That night, they cooked dinner together. It had started as a joke. Sam complaining about hotel food, Paul challenging him to do better. So they found themselves in the villa's rustic kitchen, chopping garlic and tomatoes, sleeves rolled up, hands brushing as they reached for the same wooden spoon. "Do you always look this focused when cooking?" Paul asked, voice low as he leaned close. Sam didn't look up. "Do you always hover this much? Or is this just your way of flirting?" Paul froze for a heartbeat. Then, maybe it's both. Sam finally glanced up, a crooked smile tugging at his lips. The pasta turned out edible. Barely. They ate on the terrace again, laughing over wine and scorched sauce. And for the first time since the job began, Sam allowed himself to hope. Maybe this wasn't a doomed second chance. Maybe it was a first one, finally timed right. Later that night, in his room, Sam stared at the ceiling and let the memories pour in. Paul, standing in the sunlight like some impossible memory made flesh. Paul's eyes across a table, his voice laced with regret, with interest. Paul laughing in a crowded market, like something out of a dream Sam used to have. And now Paul leaning closer, touching more, looking longer. The crush wasn't dead. It had evolved, grown teeth and tenderness, laced itself with something dangerous, something real. Sam turned over, burying his face in the pillow, and smiled. God help him. He was falling for him again. Chapter 3. I knew the old you. Now I want to know this you. The Riad in Marrakech felt like stepping into another world, one humming with centuries-old secrets. Tucked behind unassuming walls in the Medina, the traditional Moroccan house was a quiet oasis from the dizzying swirl of the souks. Its mosaic-tiled courtyard centered around a bubbling fountain, framed by pomegranate trees and shaded seating cushions in jewel-toned fabrics. The air smelled of orange blossom, mint tea, and something sweet and smoky that clung to the clay walls. Sam had barely been there a day before he felt it. That strange tug in his chest again. That quiet alertness his body saved only for Paul. Paul had arrived a few hours after him, delayed by a meeting in Casablanca, and greeted him in the courtyard with a freshly rolled scarf around his neck and sunglasses pushed up into his dark hair. His smile was casual, but his eyes swept over Sam like a man checking for bruises. "How was the flight?" Paul asked, setting down his bag. Sam shrugged, waving away the question. "Hot. Bumpy. I saw a camel. I'm basically an adventurer now." Paul chuckled. "Did you eat?" "Street food, like a local." That was his first mistake. By evening, Sam was curled on the bed in his Riyadh suite, drenched in sweat, stomach cramping, the ceiling spinning. The local fixer had dropped off medicine, and the housekeeper left a kettle of mint tea, but Sam couldn't even sit up to drink it. Every muscle ached. His skin felt like paper. He drifted in and out of restless sleep, aware of only the occasional sound of footsteps and a chair creaking nearby. When he woke around dawn, groggy and weak, the first thing he saw was Paul. Asleep, in the chair beside his bed. His legs were awkwardly stretched out, neck tilted at a painful angle, one arm slumped across the bed where it had clearly been holding Sam's wrist all night. Sam blinked hard. "Did you seriously monitor my pulse like I was a colonial maiden?" Paul stirred, groaned softly, then opened one eye. "I wasn't sure if you were going to die or dramatically recite poetry at me. I figured I should be prepared." Sam chuckled, hoarse. "And?" "Neither," Paul said, sitting up slowly and rubbing the back of his neck. "But you did moan something about lemons and betrayal at one point." Sam winced. "Sounds accurate." Paul leaned forward, checking his forehead. His hand was cool, gentle, familiar. "Fever's gone," he murmured. "You're pale, but you're always pale." Sam smiled faintly. "You know my skin tone now?" "I've been noticing a lot lately." That statement hung in the room like the scent of incense, warm, rich, and impossible to ignore. Paul looked tired, but not just from lack of sleep. There was something tender in the way he watched Sam, like he was still making sure he was really okay. "You didn't have to stay," Sam said. Paul didn't flinch. "I did." That evening, with Sam on the mend, they moved to the rooftop of the Riad. Blankets and cushions had been arranged near a small brazier glowing with embers. The city pulsed around them. Distant prayer calls, faint laughter, the hiss of lanterns being lit along the Medina's rooftops. They sat in silence for a long time. Sam sipped ginger tea and watched the stars appear one by one. "I kept your rejection in my notes app," he said suddenly. Paul blinked. "What?" Sam's smile was small, almost embarrassed. "Back in college, after graduation, I wrote it down word for word. I looked at it every time I thought I'd imagined it." Paul's voice was quiet. "Why would you do that to yourself?" "I think," Sam swallowed, "I needed proof that I'd actually tried, that I wasn't just some coward who let 4 years pass without saying anything." Paul looked like he'd been struck. Sam turned his face toward the firelight, shadows playing on his sharp jaw. "I sat behind you every week. I memorized how you laughed, how you drank your coffee. I wrote articles with your name hidden in the quotes. I knew it was stupid. I knew it would never matter." Paul's voice cracked. "It mattered." Sam looked at him then. Really looked. Paul's eyes were full of something raw, something honest. "I didn't want to be a regret," Sam said, "but I think I was." "You were a moment I wasn't ready for," Paul said, "and I've never stopped wondering who you might have been to me if I'd opened that door." Sam's heart fluttered in his chest. "Do you regret it?" he asked. Paul didn't hesitate. "Yes." The air stilled. Sam let out a breath and looked down at his hands. "Well, that's inconvenient timing." Paul reached out, fingers brushing Sam's where they rested on the cushion. "Maybe. Or maybe we were always supposed to find each other again when it counted. Sam shook his head, not in disagreement, but in disbelief. You sound like you write Hallmark cards in your spare time. Paul smiled. Only the very expensive ones. They both laughed, softly. Then Paul looked at him seriously. I knew the version of you who was brave enough to confess, but I didn't really know you. Now I want to. Sam met his gaze. Why? Because this version, makes me want things I didn't let myself want back then. Sam didn't say anything. He just shifted slightly closer, shoulder-brushing Paul's. They sat there, side by side, watching the embers flicker. Later, when they went back to Sam's room so he could lie down, Paul hovered in the doorway. I should let you rest. Sam, already half under the blanket, tilted his head. You stayed last night? You wanna stay again? Paul looked unsure. I don't want to cross a line. Sam smiled. Just sleep, boss. Paul rolled his eyes at the nickname, then closed the door and kicked off his shoes. He lay on top of the blanket at first, arms crossed over his chest like a man trying very hard not to move. But in the dim light, with the hum of the city below and the warmth of the riad surrounding them, the distance between them felt unnecessary. And when Sam shifted in the night, half asleep and seeking warmth, Paul didn't pull away. He turned gently and let Sam settle beside him. One arm curled around Sam's waist, his nose brushing the back of Sam's neck, and in that quiet, shared breath of a moment, neither of them said a word. Morning came with birdsong and sunlight bleeding through carved shutters. Sam stirred slowly, registering the warmth behind him, the weight of an arm still slung across his stomach. He opened his eyes. Paul was awake and smiling. You drool, Paul whispered. Sam groaned into the pillow. You're the worst. Paul's grip tightened. Still want me to stay? Sam turned just enough to look over his shoulder. More than I should. Chapter 4. The Man I Could Fall For Twice. The ryokan in the Japanese countryside was carved into the slope of a mist-shrouded mountain, its wooden beams worn smooth with time, its shoji screens glowing softly in the twilight. The air was clean and cool, perfumed with cedar, rain-soaked moss, and the faint sweetness of plum blossoms still blooming late into spring. Sam pressed his hands to the tatami mat floor of their room, sighing in quiet appreciation. Okay, this might be my villain origin story. If I mysteriously disappear, it's because I decided to live here forever and become one with the mountain. Paul laughed behind him, slipping off his jacket. You'd last 3 days before asking where the nearest espresso machine is. Sam shot him a grin. Wow, you think I'd last 3 days? Bold of you to assume I'm that resilient. Their room overlooked a quiet forest, where birds chirped lazily and steam curled up from the outdoor onsen below. The private hot spring pool was surrounded by smooth stones and bamboo fencing, glowing lanterns already lit despite the fading daylight. Sam padded toward the window in his socks and peered down. Is it unprofessional if I suggest we do the next meeting in that onsen? Paul's voice came closer. Only if we take notes. Great, Sam said. I'll bring a waterproof pen. And absolutely no pants. Paul let out a breath that was more of a chuckle. You're getting dangerously good at making me forget I'm technically your boss. Sam turned then, leaning against the wooden frame of the window, backlit by the pale, ghostly light of early evening. His hair was slightly tousled, cheeks flushed from the mountain air. His eyes held that mischievous sparkle Paul had come to recognize and crave. You're not technically my boss, Sam said, voice softer now. You're just the guy who rejected me and keeps inviting me to incredibly romantic countries. Paul arched an eyebrow. Is that what we're calling Japan now? Incredibly romantic? Sam stepped closer, playful. Well, there's an onsen, a shared room, yukata robes, an abnormal number of paper lanterns. You do the math. Paul laughed again, low and unguarded. Come on, bath time, before you start accusing me of seduction via traditional architecture. The water was hot and laced with minerals, turning the steam fragrant and heavy. Sam sank in first, with a groan that bordered on indecent. His shoulders, tense from travel, finally relaxed beneath the surface. Paul followed, careful, settling opposite him. The pool wasn't wide enough to keep space between them for long. Their knees brushed beneath the water. The silence wasn't awkward. It was companionable, cradled by the rustle of bamboo leaves and the occasional call of a mountain bird in the distance. Sam was the first to speak. You know, he said, tipping his head back and closing his eyes, I used to daydream about moments like this. Paul glanced at him. Moments like? This, Sam said, gesturing lazily. Traveling, exploring, sitting in hot water with the man I wanted but couldn't have. Paul didn't respond at first. He looked down at his hand in the water, flexing his fingers like he wasn't quite sure how to hold what was being offered. Then, I thought I had to be perfect to be loved. Polished, controlled, always calm. But with you, I keep forgetting to pretend. Sam opened his eyes and looked at him. Paul met the gaze head-on, his voice quieter now. You talk too much, you tease, you challenge me, and instead of being annoyed, I feel. He trailed off. Sam tilted his head. Feel what? Like I'm becoming someone I like, Paul said simply. A breeze moved through the trees, rustling the paper lanterns overhead. Sam moved closer without thinking. The water shifted around them. Paul's hand rose, tentative, brushing a stray strand of hair from Sam's forehead. Can I kiss you? He asked, the question soft, reverent. Sam didn't answer with words. He leaned in, slow and sure. Their lips met with the gentleness of something sacred. No heat, no rush, just the quiet moment where want became real. Sam's hand slid up Paul's chest, resting against his collarbone. Paul cupped his face with both hands, like he couldn't quite believe Sam was letting him close. When they finally pulled apart, Sam's smile was lopsided. You kiss like someone who's been waiting a long time. Paul's eyes crinkled. I have. Later, wrapped in soft cotton yukata and flushed from both the onsen and the kiss, Sam padded barefoot through the hall toward their room. Paul walked behind him, drying his hair with a towel and trying to keep his breathing steady. Sam turned as he slid open the shoji door, grinning over his shoulder. Are you following me, Mr. Lane? I was told to protect you, Paul said, stepping inside after him. You nearly died from a street kebab 2 countries ago. Sam laughed. So dramatic. Paul let the towel fall onto a low table. The room was warm from the electric heater, the futons already laid out side by side on the floor. Which side do you want? Paul asked. Sam walked over to the nearest futon, then turned and threw himself backward onto the one beside it instead, arms spread. Whichever one you'll carry me to when I pretend to fall asleep and make you do all the work. Paul chuckled and walked to him, hovering. You're going to test the limits of my self-control tonight, aren't you? Sam looked up at him, eyes wide and teasing. Who said anything about control? Paul hesitated. Sam sat up slightly, lifting a hand to the knot at Paul's waist and tugging it just enough to loosen his robe. I'm not asking for forever, he said. I'm asking for tonight, with you. Just this. Paul didn't answer. He leaned down and kissed Sam again. This time it wasn't gentle. This time it was need, long suppressed, long hoped for. Clothes were pushed aside, bodies sinking into warmth. There were soft laughs, whispered curses, mouths on skin, the sound of breathing growing fast, then slow again. There were no rules, no roles. Just touch. Just them. When it was over, Paul pulled the blanket over both of them and wrapped Sam in his arms. Sam's head tucked under Paul's chin. His breath was steady. His fingers trailed lazy lines over Paul's chest. I used to think about this too, Paul said, voice thick. You this. Sam smiled, already half asleep. You missed out on a lot of really good years. Paul kissed his forehead. I know, but I plan on making up for every single one. Chapter 5. I'll spend the rest of my life making up for that day. Returning home should have felt like slipping back into the ordinary. But it didn't. Not for Sam. Not with Paul. They landed in Paris before dawn, bodies exhausted from the red-eye, minds still fogged with the steam of Japanese hot springs and the breathless silence they'd shared beneath paper lanterns. But instead of separating like colleagues or retreating into old routines, Paul reached for Sam's hand in the car ride from the airport. Casual, instinctive, and didn't let go. That's how it was now, quietly tethered. The man who had once said, I don't really know you, now knew how Sam took his coffee, how he hated silence while brushing his teeth, how he kicked the blankets off halfway through the night and curled into Paul's chest by morning. He knew Sam's sighs, both the annoyed ones and the content ones, and how to coax laughter from him even when he was sleep-deprived and hungry. And Sam? Sam had stopped pretending this wasn't everything he'd ever wanted. That didn't mean he wasn't terrified. Family dinner? He repeated, voice higher than usual. As in, your family? Paul looked up from his phone, blinking. They were sitting on the couch in Paul's apartment, legs tangled, a takeout container of Thai curry forgotten between them. "Yeah, my sister's in town. She asked if I was seeing someone." I said yes. Sam gaped. "You said yes?" Paul's expression softened into a slow, amused smile. "You are someone, aren't you?" Sam scrambled for a throw pillow and buried his face in it. "I thought we were still in the, post-onsen nebulous stage of whatever this is." Paul tugged the pillow down gently, eyes warm. "This is me being serious. I want you to meet them." Sam hesitated. "Then, what if they don't like me? They're going to love you." "You don't know that." Paul leaned closer, forehead brushing Sam's. "I do, because I love you." The room stilled. Sam's breath hitched. His eyes flicked up to meet Paul's. You love me?" Paul nodded slowly, his voice low and certain. "I've been falling for you since Tuscany, maybe before. I just didn't have the words until now." Sam opened his mouth, closed it, then launched himself forward and kissed Paul with every soft, stunned, giddy part of him that didn't know what to say but needed to answer somehow. The dinner was at Paul's childhood home, an old stone house nestled just outside Lyne, framed with ivy and filled with voices and laughter the second they stepped inside. Sam had worn the wrong shirt. He was sure of it the moment Paul's sister opened the door, radiant in a floral dress and dramatic earrings, and exclaimed, "C'est Louis?" before pulling him into a tight hug. "This is Leia," Paul whispered behind him, grinning like an idiot. "Sam," Leia said, taking both his hands, "you're taller than I imagined, and better looking." Paul always undersells the important details. Thank you?" Sam managed, stunned. Dinner was a blur of wine, roasted vegetables, homemade bread, and stories about Paul's childhood that made Sam laugh so hard he cried. Paul sat beside him the entire night, hand brushing his thigh under the table, gaze soft every time Sam met his eyes. When Paul stepped away to grab more drinks, Leia leaned over and whispered, "He looks like someone who finally stopped being lonely." Sam blinked, heart thudding. "Thank you," she added, voice gentler, "for helping him remember how to laugh." Sam couldn't speak. He just nodded, swallowing hard. 2 days later, Paul woke him with a passport, a packed duffel, and a smirk. "We're leaving," he said. Sam, still half asleep, frowned. "Where?" "Somewhere without a work agenda," Paul said, tugging him from bed. "No shoots, no meetings, just us." They flew to Corsica, a private cabin near the water, wild rosemary and sea air, long stretches of sand and olive trees, and a hammock that barely held them both when they fell into it, tangled and laughing. The second night, Paul lit a fire outside and pulled Sam to a bench near the flames. The stars were sharp and brilliant overhead, and the air smelled like pine. "I brought something," Paul said, pulling a small leather box from his bag. Sam blinked. "If that's a ring, I might pass out." Paul laughed. "It's not a ring." He opened it. Inside was a journal, handmade, the cover embossed with gold lettering, "The places I want to go with you." Sam picked it up with shaking hands. Inside, the first pages were already filled, photos of their trips, tucked into corners with handwritten notes. Paul's scrawled captions read things like, "You snored here. You made me laugh here. I fell harder for you here." Sam's chest ached in the best way. "I wanted to remember every moment," Paul said. "The ones I almost missed. I'm sorry I said no back then. I didn't know I was saying no to the person I'd love more than anyone." Sam looked up, eyes shimmering. "Come here," he said. Paul stepped into his arms and they kissed, slow, deep, honest. A kiss that said yes to everything they hadn't had the courage to ask for 6 years ago. That night, in the quiet warmth of their cabin, they undressed each other with a reverence that bordered on awe. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't perfect. It was real. Hands learned new rhythms. Mouths found new places to press promises. They laughed. They whispered. They tangled under the sheets like they'd done it 100 times, but knew it would always feel like the first. After, Paul pulled Sam close, kissing the curve of his shoulder, the dip behind his ear. "I love you," he murmured again. Sam smiled, heart full. "I know," he whispered back. "And I love you more for waiting until you meant it." They fell asleep skin to skin, hearts finally in sync. It wasn't a secret, it was a celebration. Chapter 6, I'm Glad You Didn't Give Up on Me. The first night, Sam slept in Paul's apartment as an official resident, not just a guest with an overnight bag. He stood in the middle of the living room, barefoot, holding a spatula in one hand and blinking at the open fridge. "We need better snacks," he declared. Paul looked up from where he was sprawled across the couch, laptop balanced on his knees, glasses sliding down the bridge of his nose. "You just moved in and you're already criticizing my snack collection?" Sam turned with a solemn nod. "This is a call to action. Your fridge is where joy comes to die." Paul laughed, closed his laptop, and stood, padding over to him. He wrapped his arms around Sam from behind, resting his chin on Sam's shoulder. "Fine, we'll do a grocery run tomorrow. You can reorganize it by mood, like you do with your playlist." "Don't tempt me," Sam muttered, closing the fridge door and turning in his arms. "Because I will." They kissed, soft and unhurried, standing in the middle of the apartment that no longer felt like Paul's, but theirs. It was filled now with Sam's books, his jackets draped over chairs, his mug that said "Professional Overthinker" sitting beside Paul's elegant ceramic one. The air smelled like shared dinners and candle wax and late-night tea. And laughter. Always laughter. They'd fallen into a rhythm since Corsica. Writing together, cooking together, waking up tangled in each other's limbs and pretending it wasn't already their favorite part of the day. But the feature was what changed everything. Originally pitched as a casual follow-up to their previous article, The Places We Loved, the new piece took on a life of its own. They titled it, "Falling in Love at 30,000 Feet, a Story Told in Cities." The article wove through vignettes, Tuscany, Amalfi, Marrakesh, Kyoto, each one a window into how two people slowly, imperfectly fell in love. It included personal reflections, fragments of dialogue, even scanned snippets from Paul's journal and Sam's old travel notes. It wasn't just polished or poetic. It was honest. Painfully, beautifully honest. When it went live, it didn't just trend. It broke the site's traffic record in 6 hours. Messages poured in from readers across the world, some who'd confessed their love and been turned down, some who were still waiting to say it, some who had said it too late, but all of them clung to the same thing, hope. That it wasn't over, that love could come back around, that maybe, just maybe, it could be better the second time. The publishing gala was held in a converted art museum on the Seine. High ceilings, soft jazz. Walls lined with gilded frames and curated lighting. Sam wore a black suit, no tie. Hair tousled just enough to look intentional. Paul looked at him like he was the only thing in the room worth staring at. "You're going to burn a hole through me," Sam whispered as they stood near the entryway. "I'd argue you're already doing that to me," Paul said, lips quirking. As the evening unfolded, they mingled with editors and journalists, sipping champagne and answering 100 versions of the same question. Are you too the real deal? Paul always answered the same way. He'd glance at Sam, smile gently, and say, "He's the man who makes me believe in second chances." Sam never tired of hearing it. Not because it was dramatic, but because Paul said it like a confession every time. Like he still couldn't believe it was true. They were standing on the rooftop an hour later, the city lights scattered beneath them like a sea of stars. It was quieter up there, just the distant echo of music from below and the buzz of warm bulbs strung between beams. Someone had brought up a portable speaker, and a soft playlist drifted through the air. The night was warm, still. Paul kicked off his shoes and turned to Sam, holding out a hand. "Dance with me." Sam arched an eyebrow. "Is this another one of your romantic ploys to make everyone jealous of our relationship?" Paul grinned. "No, this is me being selfish. I want one dance with you under these lights, barefoot, before we go home." Sam took his hand without another word. They moved slowly, swaying in a circle that didn't follow any real rhythm. Sam rested his forehead against Paul's shoulder. Paul held him tightly, one hand around his waist, the other clutching his fingers like something precious. "Did you ever think we'd end up here?" Sam murmured. Paul was quiet for a long beat. Then, "I hoped." Sam pulled back, just enough to meet his eyes. Paul's expression was open, full of affection. "You know what the worst part of turning you down was?" Sam grinned. "The part where I became hotter and more successful than you?" Paul chuckled. "The part where I almost missed this." Sam stopped dancing, cupped Paul's jaw, and kissed him. Slow, deep, and grounding. There was nothing performative about it. No show. No audience. Just two men who'd waited long enough. They stood there like that, forehead to forehead, until the song ended. Later that night, they sat on the couch at home in their sweatpants, eating reheated takeout and watching a bad documentary about haunted castles. Sam leaned into Paul's side, eyes heavy but heart wide open. You know, he said, voice a little hoarse, I spent 4 years falling in love with you from a distance. Paul threaded his fingers through Sam's hair, and I've spent every day since Corsica falling harder for you up close. Sam smiled against Paul's chest. That's not fair. You're too good at this now. Paul kissed the top of his head. Took me 6 years to get it right. I'm not wasting a second. The television played on. Neither of them moved. They didn't need to, because this warmth, this ease, this absurd documentary and cold noodles and arms around each other, this was love, too. Not the dramatic kind, the kind that stayed. He broke my heart once, but now he holds it like it's sacred, and I wouldn't want anyone else to.